Donald Trump recently levied a 25% tariff on both Canada and Mexico, which led their respective leaders to rush to the negotiating table. Trudeau actually flew all the way down to Mar-a-Lago, where he complained that the new tariffs could completely destroy the Canadian economy. Trump basically told him, listen, you have to secure your border or face the consequences. And if the tariffs destroy your economy, maybe Canada can be the 51st state and President Trudeau could be their governor. So, Ben, what do you think? Is this a serious threat from Trump? Or does this kind of hold as much weight as when Trump in 2016 was saying he was interested in buying Greenland?
I don't think he's very serious. It's probably a little more serious than Greenland, but not by much. I think it's a joke, and it's kind of funny to talk about, but realistically, I don't think it's going to happen.
I think you're absolutely right that I don't know that anyone is, storming the beaches of Toronto. Not that they have beaches in Toronto, but...
All your moose are belong to us.
Absolutely. I think this is part of a bigger tariff plan that, frankly, we're seeing these tariffs used as a negotiating tactic, right? I don't even know, particularly because we've seen that Trump has dropped these tariffs once people come to the table and give him what he's asking for, mainly in this case with Mexico and Canada, security at the border. I think that this tariff plan has been largely successful so far because people have come to the table and said, okay, listen, we can't afford what you're suggesting. So whatever you want, you've got it.
Yeah. It seems as though Trump is not as committed to tariffs as some people would hope. Personally, I think it'd be a really good economic strategy. True, we would pay in the short term. Our economy would probably take a big hit, but we'd be so much better off in the long term if we were producing our own products. We would have more autonomy. The products would be higher quality. And once the economy bounced back, I think we'd be in much better shape.
Yeah, so I think in the case of China, these tariffs are likely to stick around because even Biden thought that it was appropriate for these tariffs to stay. Because if the cost of importing a good from another country is more expensive than it would be to produce that thing here in America, I think countries are going to move to America.
Yeah, tariffs are a tricky issue because on one hand, Americans do get cheaper products when they're made overseas. But at the same time, we're sacrificing our own independence and autonomy. If another country controls the production of our products, then we are, even in a small way, indebted or dependent upon them. So again, I think these do need to be applied selectively probably. But I agree. I think in cases like China, it probably is a very good idea because it's just so difficult for American-made products to compete with Chinese labor.
Well, and I think that the global economy today is largely built on this kind of global trade. And so this idea that everything has to shift back to the United States is probably not realistic. But what we saw in 2020 was that a lot of really critical drugs were being made in China. A lot of critical chips were being made in China. A lot of critical, even things for military applications were being made in China. And when you have a state that is not necessarily fully antagonistic towards you, but certainly has the capacity to be in the future, is that where you want critical infrastructure to be coming from? And I think we would all kind of say no, right?
Absolutely. I think that's a powerful card in potential competitors' hands when we do come to the negotiating table or if we do think about the potential of a future conflict. But even beyond that, if our products are produced in another country that we don't have direct control over, something other than a conflict with us could seriously impact us just because we're outsourcing things to another country. If, China's economy collapsed or, they had issues that we had no control over, that impacts us. And I think having more control along with higher quality products and more jobs in America overall would be a good thing, even though it would come with growing pains.
So I think that we both agree in a lot of ways on the end result that needs to happen. My question to you maybe would be, and maybe this is a question to myself as well, are these sort of intimidation tactics the best way to get this done? This isn't really the nicest way to play, particularly with people like Canada and Mexico, who we have quite close relationships to. Do you see this as damaging those relationships, or is this kind of the cost of doing business?
I think it remains to be seen. I think we have two extremes in the forms of Biden and Trump, where on one hand, Biden seems all too eager to cater to other countries and not stand up for our own interests. And on the other hand, Trump, although I generally agree with his policies, he doesn't always have the best bedside manner. So the the best option probably lies somewhere in the middle. But Trump's tactics seem to be working for him. So I think he's moving in the right direction, and hopefully it'll work in our favor.
Absolutely. And I think there's, two last little bits that I want to cover on this topic before we move on. And the first is who really pays for tariffs? And the second one is what if someone calls Trump's bluff? To address the first part, tariffs are essentially an import tax placed on a specific country. So you say, hey, if this is made in China and it comes to America, when it gets here, the American company that imported it has to pay that tariff. So I think there's a little bit of confusion as to who pays. Like China is not paying these tariffs. It is American companies, but it makes it so that way those Chinese goods would not be feasible to sell on the American market. But Ben, I mean, what happens if a country says like, hey, you know what? Keep the tariff. Go for it. You're not going to get what you want. Who really pays here?
So we have to think long term. In a short term, it's true Americans would pay for that, and the price of our products would go up. But an analogy I would use is healthy eating. So yeah, it's easier and cheaper to just go to Taco Bell rather than buying a steak and cooking a nice meal and everything. You have to do dishes, you have to do the cooking, and then it takes time to prepare, clean up, and then also eating it. Maybe Taco Bell seems like a more immediately gratifying thing to eat. But in the long term, you're going to be so much better off if you're cooking your own healthy meals. And I think it's the same thing with tariffs. It's whether you're paying in the short term or the long term. So yes, prices might go up now, but in the long term, we're going to be a lot healthier, just like if you were cooking all your own meals and living in a healthy manner and putting the investment up front rather than later on.